Aaron had one hand on the front door when Lori heard the garage door slam open. Then he shouted her name. Not loudly at first, just once, but something in his voice made Lori run. She reached the kitchen and saw smoke pushing under the door that led to the garage. Aaron was coughing somewhere inside, and then something crashed hard enough to make her freeze. Lori! This time she heard fear. She grabbed the door. Heat struck her face so fast she pulled back. Aaron was still inside. For 1 second Lori stood there, staring at the flames spreading between them. Then she went back for him. Welcome to Mr. Graham's story, where every story leaves a lesson. Whether you're new here or part of our growing family, thank you for being here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and as the story unfolds, tell me what you would have done in the same situation. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps us bring more meaningful stories to people around the world. Now, let's begin today's story. Lori pulled the door open again. The smoke was thicker now. She couldn't see Aaron. Aaron! Here! His voice came from somewhere low and to the left. Lori dropped to her knees. The concrete floor burned through her palms almost immediately, but she kept moving. Smoke filled her throat. Her eyes watered so badly she could barely keep them open. Then she saw him. Aaron was on the ground beside the workbench. A metal storage shelf had fallen across one leg. The back corner of the garage was already burning. For 1 second, Lori just stared. Aaron, don't come in. She moved closer. Are you serious? Lori, get out. She grabbed the shelf. It barely moved. Aaron tried to push himself up, but his face tightened. Go. No. Lori, no. She didn't know how she was going to get him out. She only knew she wasn't leaving without trying. The heat was getting worse. Something popped behind them. Lori flinched. Aaron saw it. Listen to me, he said. You have to go. She shook her head and grabbed the shelf again. Help me lift. Lori, help me. That finally got through to him. Aaron pushed with both hands. Lori lifted with everything she had. The shelf rose only a few inches. Aaron dragged his leg free. Move. He tried to stand. His injured leg gave out. Lori caught him. They both hit the floor. The pain in Lori's shoulder was immediate. Sharp, wrong, but Aaron was moving. That was all she cared about. They started toward the door. Halfway there, the flames surged. Lori felt the heat against her back. Aaron stumbled again. She pulled him. Come on. I can't. Yes, you can. My leg. Then use me. Aaron looked at her. For the first time, he seemed to understand what she was doing. Lori, stop. She pulled him harder. Not happening. Another crash came from behind them. Aaron finally moved. Together they reached the door. Lori pushed him through first. Then something struck her. She never remembered exactly what. Only the sudden pain, the floor disappearing beneath her, and Aaron turning around. Lori! She heard him coming back. She wanted to tell him not to. Then everything became noise. When Lori opened her eyes again, someone was cutting away her clothes. She couldn't feel her right side properly. A face appeared above her. Lori, can you hear me? She tried to answer. Nothing came out. The ceiling moved above her. Or maybe she was moving, she couldn't tell. Then she heard Aaron. I'm here. His voice sounded far away. She turned her head. Even through the confusion, she knew him. His face was streaked with soot. There was blood near his temple. He was trying to push past someone. Sir, you need to stay back. That's my wife. Lori tried to lift her hand. It barely moved. Aaron saw. Lori. His face broke. Not dramatically, just suddenly, like he had been holding himself together and couldn't anymore. I'm here, he said again. Her eyes closed. The last thing she remembered was his voice following her as they rushed her away. Lori woke in the hospital the next day, or maybe later. Time had become difficult to measure. Her mouth was dry. Her body felt like it belonged to someone else. Then she saw Aaron asleep in the chair beside her bed. His leg was wrapped. One arm was in a sling. Lori watched him for a few seconds. She had saved him. The thought came quietly, not proudly, not even emotionally, just as a fact. Then Aaron woke. His eyes found hers. He stood too quickly and winced. Hey. Lori tried to speak. Nothing. He reached for the cup of water and helped her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Aaron looked at her hand. He took it carefully. I thought I lost you. Lori looked at him. His eyes were red. I went back for you, she whispered. Aaron's face tightened. I know. You were trapped. I know. Lori closed her eyes. For the first time, the pain began to feel real. Aaron squeezed her hand. "I'm here," he said. Lori opened her eyes again. He was crying now. "I'm not going anywhere." Lori believed him, and at that moment she had no reason not to. She did not know that long before the fire filled their garage with smoke, Aaron had already begun leaving her in ways she had been too trusting to see. For the first few days, Lori did not think about their marriage. She thought about pain, nurses waking her, doctors using words like recovery, mobility, and rehabilitation without promising how much of her old life would come back. Aaron was there through most of it. He slept badly in the chair beside her bed and complained that hospitals should make better coffee. Once Lori caught him trying to hide a stale granola bar in his jacket because the nurse had told him not to eat near her. "Really?" she whispered. Aaron looked down at the bar. "What, you're hiding snacks now?" He smiled for the first time in days. "I wasn't hiding it. You put it inside your coat." "That's called storage." Lori tried to laugh. The movement hurt. Aaron immediately stood. "Okay, don't laugh." That only made her laugh again. For a few seconds they sounded like themselves. Then the pain returned and Aaron's smile disappeared. He reached for her hand. "Sorry." Lori looked at him. "For what?" He stared at their hands. "You shouldn't have gone back in there." She was quiet. "You were trapped. I know. I wasn't leaving you." Aaron closed his eyes. That seemed to hurt him more than anything she could have said. "I keep seeing it," he whispered. "Seeing what?" "You coming through that door." Lori watched his face. "You were scared. I was terrified. Me too." Aaron looked up. Lori's voice was weak but steady. "I just didn't have time to think about it." He swallowed. "Lori, don't." He nodded slowly. "I can't promise that." "What?" "Not to think about it." She squeezed his hand as much as she could. "Then think about something else." He gave her a tired look. "Helpful. I'm recovering. I can't do all the work." That brought another small smile, but it didn't last. The doctor came later that afternoon. Lori listened carefully even when she wished she couldn't understand. Her injuries would require time. There would be rehabilitation. There were things they would not know immediately. Aaron sat beside her without moving. After the doctor left, Lori stared at the ceiling. Neither of them spoke. Finally she asked, "What if I don't walk the same?" Aaron turned toward her. Don't what? Don't start doing that." "Doing what?" "Deciding everything before we know." Lori looked at him. Aaron leaned forward. "We're going to take this one thing at a time." She watched him. "You don't know what you're agreeing to." "I don't care." "Aaron, I mean it." His voice cracked slightly. He looked away, then back at her. "You saved my life." Lori said nothing. "And now you're lying here because of me." "Because I chose to go back." "Lori, I did." Aaron's face tightened. She understood what he was trying to do. He wanted to take responsibility for the fire. She wanted him to understand that she had made a choice. Neither of them could make the other person feel better. Finally, Aaron said, "I'm not leaving." The room became quiet. Lori turned her head toward him. No matter what, his eyes filled again. No matter what, she believed him, not because she was desperate, because Aaron had been there. He had slept in that uncomfortable chair. He had answered questions when she was too exhausted. He had cried when he thought she was asleep. At that moment, his promise was not a performance. It was real. That was what made it dangerous. Later that night, Lori woke to find Aaron standing by the window with his phone. The screen disappeared when he heard her move. Too quickly. Lori noticed. "You okay?" Aaron turned. "Yeah. You looked worried. Just work." She watched him. "Now? I've been behind." Lori nodded. He slipped the phone into his pocket. "Go back to sleep." She studied him for another second, then closed her eyes. Before the fire, Aaron had been worried about money, the mortgage, the repairs, the bills that seemed to arrive together. Lori knew that. She also knew he hated talking about it. So when she saw the tension in his face, she told herself that was all it was. Stress. Nothing more. Over the next week, Lori learned how much help she would need. She hated asking Aaron to adjust her pillow, hated needing assistance to reach something a few inches away, hated hearing the word wait when she wanted to stand. One afternoon, she dropped a cup of water. It shattered. Lori froze. Aaron rushed toward the bed. "Don't move." She stared at the broken pieces. "I can get it." "No, I said I can." "Lori." She stopped. Erin picked up the pieces while she turned away. Her eyes filled. She wiped them quickly. Erin noticed anyway. He sat beside her. You don't have to do everything right now. Lori kept looking away. I don't want you doing everything. I know. What if this is permanent? Erin went quiet. Lori hated that silence. Say something. He took her hand. We'll figure it out. That's not an answer. No. His thumb moved gently across her hand. But it's the truth. Lori finally looked at him. Erin leaned closer. I'm here. Again. The same words. And each time he said them, Lori built her future around them. A few days later, a nurse helped Lori sit beside the window for the first time. Outside, life was moving normally. Cars, people carrying coffee, a woman arguing gently with a child in the parking lot. Lori stared at it all. I want to go home. Erin stood beside her. We'll get you there. Our home? He looked at her. Of course. Lori nodded. She pictured their modest house. The old kitchen. The hallway they had painted twice because they couldn't agree on the color. The garage they would have to rebuild. For the first time since the fire, she allowed herself to imagine returning. Maybe the fire had destroyed part of their life, but maybe rebuilding it would bring them closer. She looked at Erin. He smiled. Then his phone vibrated. His expression changed before he could hide it. Lori noticed. Who is it? Erin glanced at the screen, then put the phone away. No one. Lori frowned, but Erin bent down and kissed her forehead. Get some rest. And because she still believed the man beside her was coming back to her, Lori let the question go. She did not yet understand that sometimes the first sign of betrayal is not what a person tells you. It is what they suddenly become unwilling to let you see. Lori came home 6 weeks after the fire. By then the garage was gone behind a temporary wall, and the house smelled faintly of new drywall and industrial cleaner. Erin had tried to make the living room easier for her. He had moved a lamp, cleared a path, put her medications on the side table in neat rows. It was thoughtful. And somehow Lori cried the first time she saw it. Erin stood in the doorway. What's wrong? Nothing. Lori. She wiped her face. I just want my house back. He looked around the room. So do I. For a moment, neither of them knew what to say. Then Erin nodded toward the hallway. One room at a time. Lori gave a small smile. That's what everybody keeps saying. Maybe everybody's right. Don't get carried away. That earned a short laugh. It felt good. Almost normal. But normal lasted less than a minute. Lori needed help getting to the bathroom. Then help getting back. Then help with something she had once done without thinking. By dinner, Erin looked exhausted. Lori noticed. You should sit down. I am sitting down. I mean after you eat. He glanced at her. I'll be fine. The answer came too quickly. Lori let it go. She was getting good at that. The first time Lori saw the electrical paperwork again, it was inside a box Erin had left beside the dining table. She had been looking for insurance documents. The papers were mixed together. Repair estimates, fire reports, receipts, photographs. Then she saw the electrician's invoice, not the final bill, the earlier one. Lori pulled it closer. Electrical panel, further inspection recommended. Below it was a handwritten note. Burning odor reported near garage outlet. Repair recommended. Lori read it twice. Erin came in from the kitchen. What are you doing? She looked up. Why was this in here? His face changed, only slightly, but Lori saw it. I don't know. Probably insurance. No, this. She tapped the page. Erin took it from her. Oh. Oh? He scanned it. Lori watched him. The electrician mentioned a few things. A few things? It wasn't like that. What was it like? Erin sighed. Lori, I was going to deal with it. When? I don't know. She stared at him. He placed the paper on the table. We had other expenses. So you knew there was something wrong? I knew something needed to be checked. Near the garage. That's not what caused the fire. Do we know that? Erin looked away. The answer was enough. Lori's stomach tightened. The fire investigator had never given them a simple explanation. The damage had been too severe to identify one exact point of failure. Erin rubbed his forehead. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't say you did. Then why are you looking at me like that? Lori's voice dropped. Because I almost died in that garage. The room went still. Erin's shoulders fell. I know. No, you keep saying that, because I do know. But you didn't fix it. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Lori looked at the paper again. A repair he postponed. A warning neither of them had discussed after the fire. She suddenly remembered asking Aaron months earlier whether the electrician had come back. He had said, "I handled it." She had believed him. Now she wasn't sure what that sentence had meant. Aaron picked up the paperwork. "I can't do this right now." Lori stared at him. "Do what?" "This. Talk about it. Turn the fire into something I did to you. I never said you did anything to me, but that's what you're thinking." "No." It was the truth. Lori did not believe Aaron had wanted the fire. She had never believed that. But watching him try to escape the conversation made something inside her shift. Not because of the fire itself. Because Aaron seemed more afraid of what the question meant than interested in answering it. That night, Lori couldn't sleep. Aaron was beside her, facing away. His breathing was uneven. She stared at the ceiling. Finally she said, "Why didn't you tell me?" Aaron didn't move. "Tell you what?" "About the warning." He was quiet for too long. "I forgot." Lori turned her head. "You forgot? I had a lot going on." The words landed badly. Lori almost asked what had been so important. Instead she said, "I asked you. I said I was going to handle it. You said you handled it." Aaron turned over. "I didn't lie to you." She looked at him. "What would you call it?" His face hardened. "You really want to do this right now?" Lori went still. Do this, as if she had created the problem by asking about it. She turned back toward the ceiling. A few minutes passed. Then Aaron's phone buzzed on the nightstand. Lori saw the screen light up. Aaron reached for it immediately. Too quickly. He turned it over before she could see the name. "Who was that?" she asked. "Work. At midnight?" Aaron exhaled. "Lori." She said nothing. He put the phone down. "Go to sleep." The room became quiet again. But this time, it wasn't the same kind of quiet. Lori stared into the darkness. On the table downstairs was a repair warning Aaron had never followed through on. Beside her was a husband who had suddenly become angry when she asked why. And somewhere outside that room, someone had just texted him at midnight. Lori closed her eyes. For the first time since the fire, she wondered if Aaron was hiding more than his guilt. The next morning, Aaron acted as though nothing had happened. He made coffee, helped Lori into her chair, asked whether she wanted eggs. Lori watched him move around the kitchen and wondered if she had imagined the tension in his voice the night before. That became easier to do when she needed his help. Her body had become a schedule. Medication, exercises, rest, another attempt at standing, another reminder not to rush. Simple things took planning. A shower could require Aaron nearby. Getting dressed could take 20 minutes. Some mornings Lori woke determined to do more. Other mornings she stared at the edge of the bed because even beginning felt exhausting. Aaron tried. At first he really did. He drove her to rehabilitation. Learned how to help without pulling too hard. Kept track of appointments when she was tired. But trying and enduring were not always the same thing. One afternoon Lori was practicing a transfer from her chair to the therapy bench. Her arms shook. Aaron stood beside her. "You've got it." Lori shifted. Her foot slipped. She grabbed his arm. "Sorry." "It's okay." She tried again. "Sorry." "Lori." "I know." Another attempt. Her balance failed. This time Aaron caught her, but he let out a breath through his nose. Small, barely noticeable. Lori heard it anyway. She stopped moving. "What?" "Nothing. You're frustrated." "No. You are." Aaron looked toward the window. "I'm tired." Lori said nothing. He immediately looked back at her. "Not tired of you." She gave him a faint smile. "You didn't have to say that." "I know." The therapist entered before either of them continued, but on the drive home, Aaron kept both hands tight around the steering wheel. Lori looked out the window. The city passed by. Neither of them spoke. The changes came slowly enough that Lori could explain every one of them. Aaron took longer to answer when she called. Stress. He spent more time outside after work. He needs a break. Sometimes she spoke and realized halfway through that he wasn't listening. He's worried about money. When she needed help with something small, impatience occasionally crossed his face before he could hide it. He doesn't mean it. Lori defended him so often inside her own mind that she didn't notice what she was doing. One evening she dropped her phone. It slid beneath the sofa. Aaron was in the kitchen. "Can you get that?" "Yeah, give me a second." She waited. The television kept playing. "It's just right there," she called. "I said give me a second." His voice was sharper than the words required. Silence followed. A few seconds later, Aaron appeared. He reached down, picked up the phone, and placed it in her hand. "Sorry," Lori nodded. He went back into the kitchen. Neither mentioned it again. Rachel was easier. Aaron would never have described it that way. If anyone had asked, he would have said they were talking. That was all. But with Rachel, there were no therapy appointments. No questions about mobility. No insurance forms. No reminders of the night in the garage. She knew about the fire, of course. Everyone at work did. But when Aaron spoke to her, she didn't look at him with the same mixture of gratitude and pity he had begun seeing everywhere. She asked how he was doing. At first, that question had felt harmless. Then it became the reason he answered her messages. They talked about work, then about money, then about things he couldn't say at home because saying them would make them real. He told Rachel he felt like every decision had become impossible. She told him he sounded exhausted. Aaron stared at that message for a long time. No accusation, no history, no wheelchair beside the bed, just someone who seemed to understand him without asking anything from him. He knew how unfair that was. He also knew he kept coming back. Lori noticed he was smiling at his phone again. It happened one evening while she was doing exercises on the living room floor. Aaron was sitting at the dining table. She looked up. "What's funny?" His face changed. "Nothing. You smiled. I can smile without filing a report." Lori laughed softly. "Apparently." He put the phone down, too quickly. Lori went back to her exercise. A few minutes later, Aaron's phone buzzed again. He stood and picked it up. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Outside. To answer a text?" He looked at her. "It's work." Lori nodded. There it was again. That explanation. Work, stress, money, anything that made sense. Aaron stepped outside. Through the window, Lori watched him cross the small yard and stop near the fence. He was talking now. Not loudly. But his posture was different. Relaxed. She couldn't remember the last time he had looked relaxed inside the house. The thought bothered her. Then she felt guilty for having it. Maybe she was becoming suspicious because her whole life had changed. Maybe Aaron needed privacy because he had become a caregiver before he had learned how to be one. Maybe this was what difficult marriages looked like after something terrible happened. Lori finished her exercises. When Aaron came back inside, he found her staring at the therapy bands in her lap. "You okay?" "Yeah." He stood there. She looked up. "You were outside a while. Work stuff. Again." Lori nodded. Then Aaron's phone, still in his hand, lit up. For a second, the screen faced her. Lori saw only the first line of a message. "I miss talking to you when—" Aaron turned the phone over. Their eyes met, and this time neither of them explained it away. Lori didn't ask Aaron about the message that night. Not because she wasn't thinking about it, because she didn't know what she had seen. One incomplete sentence was not proof of anything. And after months of pain, dependence, and tension, Lori was afraid of becoming the kind of wife who searched for betrayal everywhere. So she said nothing. Aaron noticed. That was almost worse. The next morning he was unusually helpful. He made breakfast before Lori woke. He reminded her about an afternoon therapy appointment. He even sat through her exercises without checking his phone. It should have reassured her. Instead, it felt arranged. Lori hated herself for thinking that. The truth came 3 days later. Aaron was in the shower. His phone was on the kitchen counter. Lori hadn't gone looking for it. She was reaching for the remote when the screen lit up beside her. A name appeared. Rachel. Then the message. "I meant what I said. I miss you. I just don't know how much longer we can keep pretending this isn't happening." Lori stared at the screen. The phone went dark. She didn't touch it. For several seconds she simply sat there. Then it lit up again. This time another message appeared. Especially after everything that happened with Lori. Lori's mouth went dry. She picked up the phone. Her hand shook so badly she almost dropped it. The phone was not locked. For 1 second she still considered putting it down. Then she opened the messages. The newest conversations were bad enough. But Lori kept scrolling. Past the hospital. Past the fire. Past the first days of rehabilitation. Then further. Her breathing changed. The dates were there. Weeks before the fire. A message from Rachel. "You don't have to stay miserable just because you've been together a long time." Aaron's reply came hours later. "It's complicated." Another message. "Is it complicated or are you afraid to admit you're unhappy?" Then Aaron. "I don't know what I am anymore." Lori kept scrolling. She found references to arguments she remembered. Nights when Aaron had come home quiet. Times he had said work was stressful. Moments when she had asked if something was wrong and he had answered, Nothing I want to talk about right now. All of it had gone somewhere. Just not to her. Lori stopped scrolling. The bathroom door opened. She heard Aaron moving down the hallway. Her body seemed to know before her mind caught up. She set the phone back on the counter. Aaron entered the kitchen, drying his hair. He looked at her, then at his phone. Something passed across his face. Lori saw it. "What?" Aaron didn't answer. She asked again. "What?" His shoulders dropped. "Lori, that was enough. Not the whole truth, but enough. Who is Rachel?" He sat down slowly. "You know who Rachel is. I know where you work. Lori, how long?" Aaron rubbed his face. "It wasn't. How long?" He looked at the counter. Lori felt something cold settle inside her. "Since before the fire?" Aaron said nothing. Her eyes filled. "Since before the fire? It wasn't physical." Lori laughed once, a small broken sound. "That wasn't my question." He looked up. "I was unhappy." She stared at him. "And you told her. I needed someone to talk to. You had a wife. We weren't doing well." Lori went still. That sentence hurt more than she expected, because it carried something familiar. The beginning of a new story, one where Aaron's choices had simply happened because the marriage had already been broken. "Were we unhappy?" she asked. Aaron hesitated. "I was." Lori looked away. For months, she had blamed the fire for changing him, the pressure, the caregiving, the exhaustion. She had been trying to understand when her husband started disappearing, but he had not disappeared after the fire. He had already found somewhere else to put the parts of himself he refused to bring home. And then she had gone into a burning garage to save him. Lori looked back at Aaron. "You were already talking to her when I went in there." His face changed. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Use the fire like what? Like I betrayed you before you got hurt." The room went silent. Lori's voice became very quiet. "Did you?" Aaron looked at her, then away. And for the first time since she opened his phone, Lori understood that whatever explanation he was about to give her, she was no longer willing to help him make it sound better. Aaron stayed silent long enough for Lori to understand that he was choosing his words. She hated that. Not because she expected him to confess everything perfectly, because she could see him trying to find the version that hurt him least. Finally, he said, "I didn't plan for this to happen." Lori looked at him. "Which part?" He frowned. "Rachel, you mean the part where you started talking to another woman about our marriage? I didn't go looking for an affair." "But you kept going back." Aaron looked away. "Yes." The answer sat between them. Lori's hands were cold. She folded them in her lap because she didn't want him to see them shaking. "How long were you unhappy?" "I don't know. Try." Aaron exhaled. "A while." "How long is a while?" "Lori, because apparently I wasn't invited to that conversation." His face tightened. I felt like I couldn't say anything without it becoming an argument. "Did you try?" "Yes." "No. You complained about little things. You got quiet. You said you were stressed. That's not the same thing as telling your wife your marriage is falling apart." Aaron stood and walked toward the window. For a moment, Lori thought he might leave the room. Instead, he stayed there with his back to her. "I felt pressured all the time," he said. "I felt like I couldn't do anything right." Lori listened. Some of it hurt because some of it was true. She had pushed him about money. She had criticized him when bills were late. She had been frustrated when he avoided decisions. But those arguments had been inside a marriage she thought they were both still trying to repair. "You could have told me," she said. "I did tell you." "No, you told Rachel." Aaron turned around. "I didn't know how to talk to you anymore, and somehow you knew exactly how to talk to her." "That isn't fair." Lori gave a tired laugh. "No." Aaron rubbed his jaw. "With Rachel, I didn't feel like everything I said was wrong. There it was, the thing he had probably told himself more than once." Lori nodded slowly. "So you found someone who only knew your side. That's not..." She didn't have to live with your decisions. She didn't know about the bills you put off. She didn't ask why you said you'd handle something and then didn't. Aaron's face changed. "Don't bring the fire into this." "Why not?" "Because I didn't cause it. I didn't say you did." "But you keep..." "No, Aaron, you keep hearing things I'm not saying because you're already answering them in your own head." That stopped him. Lori leaned back. Her body hurt. Everything hurt. But for the first time, she wasn't interested in comforting him. "You were unhappy," she said. "Fine, I believe you." Aaron looked at her. "You felt pressured, criticized, overwhelmed. Maybe I didn't see how bad it had become." He said nothing. "But what did you do with it?" His eyes dropped. Lori continued. "Did you sit me down and tell me you were thinking about leaving?" "No." "Did you ask me to go to counseling?" "No." "Did you tell me you were falling in love with someone else?" "Lori, I wasn't." She waited. Aaron stopped. The silence answered for him. "You found another place to be understood," she said. His face tightened. "And then you came home and acted like the distance between us was something we had both created." Aaron sat down again. "I never wanted you hurt." "I know." The word surprised him. Lori looked toward the darkened hallway. "You didn't have to want the fire. That's not the point." "Then what is?" She turned back to him. "The point is that I almost died believing I was saving a man who was still standing inside this marriage with me." Aaron stared at her. "And now I find out you were already halfway somewhere else." His eyes filled, but Lori couldn't reach for him. Not this time. "I was confused," he said. "You were dishonest. I didn't know what I wanted, but you knew what you didn't want to lose." Aaron frowned. Lori glanced toward his phone. "The marriage, your house, your life, me taking care of the practical things while you figured out how unhappy you were somewhere else." "That isn't what I was doing. Maybe not on purpose." He flinched. Lori was tired of arguing about intentions. The damage was real whether Aaron had planned every piece of it or not. Over the next few days, the house changed. Aaron still helped with therapy, still cooked dinner, still drove her to appointments, but they no longer pretended. Some nights he slept in the guest room. Other nights, Lori lay awake wondering who he was talking to when the house went quiet. She stopped asking, and Aaron seemed relieved by that, which hurt in a way she hadn't expected. One afternoon, while Aaron was out, Lori sat at the dining table with a folder of insurance papers and household records. She had always handled them. Mortgage statements, repair receipts, savings, tax documents. For years, Aaron had teased her about keeping everything. You could survive a tornado with those files. Lori had always laughed. That afternoon, she opened the drawer beneath the table. Then she opened the folder Aaron had moved there after the fire. She wasn't looking for evidence against him. She was looking for something practical. A bank statement, a payment, anything she needed for the insurance claim. Instead, she found an account she didn't recognize. Lori stared at the name on the statement, then at the date. It was from before the fire. And suddenly, Rachel was no longer the only question. What else had Aaron been preparing for while Lori still believed they were building a life together? Lori stared at the statement until the numbers stopped making sense. It was a savings account, not a joint one, not an account she had forgotten. It was in Aaron's name alone. The opening date was 8 months before the fire. She checked again. Then she pulled out another statement. There were transfers, small amounts at first, then larger ones. Lori reached for the calculator she kept in the drawer. For years she had managed their practical life. Aaron handled parts of the income, but Lori knew when the mortgage was due, which repairs had been postponed, and what their savings could realistically cover. That had been one of the things Aaron sometimes complained about. She was always asking questions. Now, sitting at the dining table, Lori understood why he had started answering fewer of them. The transfers had been made on different dates. Some came shortly after arguments she remembered. One came after Aaron had complained about feeling buried by bills. Another appeared the week they argued about the electrician. Lori stopped. She remembered that argument clearly. She had wanted the garage outlet checked immediately. Aaron had said they needed to wait. They had fought over money. Then, 2 days later, he moved money into an account she didn't know existed. Lori sat back. It wasn't enough to prove what she feared. Maybe Aaron had been saving. Maybe he had planned to tell her eventually. She kept going. Near the bottom of the folder was a credit card statement. Then another, a payment she didn't recognize, apartment security deposit. Lori stared at it. The date was 5 months before the fire. She read it again. Aaron had never mentioned an apartment. Her first thought was that there had to be an explanation. There was always an explanation. A mistake, a work arrangement, something temporary. She looked for the address. It was on the next page, not far away. Lori felt the blood leave her face. She waited until Aaron came home, not because she had planned some confrontation, because she could no longer make herself do anything else. When he walked in, he immediately noticed the papers. "What is all this?" Lori didn't answer. Aaron set down his keys. "Lori," she held up the statement. "What is this?" He looked at it. His face went blank. That was worse than panic. "What are you talking about?" "The apartment." Aaron took the paper. His eyes moved across the page. Then he sat down. Lori watched him. "Tell me." He rubbed his forehead. "It wasn't what you think." She almost laughed. Instead she said, "Then this should be easy." Aaron looked up. The silence stretched. Finally he said, "I was thinking about leaving." Lori stopped breathing for a second. "Before the fire?" "Yes." The word was quiet, but there it was, plain, irreversible. Lori looked at the statements spread across the table. The hidden savings, the transfers, the apartment deposit. All those months when she had thought Aaron was withdrawing because he was stressed. All those arguments she believed were arguments between two people still trying to stay. "You were leaving," she said. "I didn't know if I would actually do it. You paid for an apartment. I was confused. You moved money. I was scared." "Of what?" Aaron looked at her. "Of being stuck." Lori went still. He seemed to realize what he had said only after it was already in the room. Stuck. That was the word. Not unhappy, not lost. Stuck. Lori looked down at the scarred skin on her hand. After the fire, she had become dependent on him in ways she never imagined. And the thought arrived quietly, without drama. If the fire had never happened, Aaron might have left her anyway. But the fire had changed who was trapped. Lori almost destroyed herself trying to get Aaron out of that garage. Meanwhile, months earlier, he had been setting money aside to escape the life they shared. The fire had not created his betrayal. It had only placed her inside the consequences of something already underway. Aaron leaned forward. "I never planned for you to get hurt." Lori looked at him. "I know. I never wanted this. I know." He frowned, almost desperate. "Then why are you looking at me like that?" Lori took a long breath. Because the answer was finally becoming clear. She had spent months asking herself what changed Aaron. The fire, her injuries, the pressure of caregiving. Rachel. But Aaron had not become someone else. She had simply been the last person to know what he had already decided to hide. "I thought you started leaving after the fire," Lori said. Aaron closed his eyes. Lori continued, "But you were already gone." He shook his head. "No, I was still there." She looked around the room. "At dinner?" Aaron said nothing. "In our bed?" His jaw tightened. "At the hospital when you promised you weren't going anywhere?" "Lori, you were physically there." Her voice remained quiet. "That isn't the same thing." Aaron looked as though he wanted to argue, but there was nothing left to argue about. The dates were on the table. Lori had kept the records. He had made the decisions. For years, Aaron had teased her about saving every receipt and every statement. Now those same records had given Lori something he could no longer explain away. A timeline. And that timeline told her something she could not unlearn. Aaron had not abandoned her because recovery became difficult. He had already begun preparing a life without her before she ever walked into that burning garage. Lori did not confront Aaron again that night. There was nothing left to gain from watching him explain. She waited until he went upstairs, then pulled the electrical papers back out. The invoice was still there. So was the handwritten warning. But this time she noticed something else. A date. The electrician had come 3 months before the fire. Lori remembered the visit. She had been working from home that afternoon. Aaron had called her afterward and said the garage wiring needed a couple things looked at. Handle it. She remembered the answer because it had ended the conversation. Now she found a second document underneath the first. An estimate. The work had not been cheap. Further inspection, replacement of damaged components, recommended follow-up. Lori sat very still. Aaron had known. Not that a fire would happen, not that anyone would be hurt, but he had known something required attention, the same way he had known the marriage required attention, the same way he had known he was unhappy, the same way he had known he was talking to Rachel too much. Every difficult truth seemed to receive the same answer from Aaron. Later, I'll handle it, it'll be fine, until it wasn't. The next afternoon, Lori asked Aaron to sit down. He looked tired before she even spoke. More papers? Lori placed the estimate on the table. Aaron stared at it. Where did you find that? In the folder with everything else. He leaned back. What do you want me to say? The truth would be a good start. His jaw tightened. I already told you I was going to take care of it. When? I don't know. You had the money. Aaron looked at her. Lori held up the bank statement. You were moving money into another account. That doesn't mean I could just spend it. No, it means you were making choices about what mattered. Aaron stood. I did not choose for that fire to happen. Lori looked up at him. I know. Then stop acting like I did. I'm not. You are. Her voice remained calm. No, Aaron, I'm asking why you keep turning every question into an accusation I haven't made. That stopped him. Lori tapped the estimate. Why didn't you fix it? He looked toward the kitchen. For a moment she thought he might walk away. Instead he said, because I thought it could wait. The answer was almost ordinary. That made it worse. Lori nodded. Okay. Aaron frowned. Okay? You thought it could wait. She repeated it as if trying to understand the sentence. And then I asked you about it. I know. And you told me you'd handled it. I was going to. You hadn't. No. Lori looked down. For months, she had carried one question inside her without saying it aloud. Why had she gone back? Because Aaron was her husband. Because he was trapped. Because in that moment, there had been no calculation, no list of grievances, no chance to ask whether the marriage was worth saving. She had simply gone. Now she wondered why that choice had become the center of everyone else's story about the fire. Even Aaron's family had said it. You didn't have to go back in, as though Lori's decision was the tragedy they understood best. But nobody had asked why Aaron had never followed through on the warning. Nobody had sat him down and said, you should have taken care of it. Lori looked at him. Do you know what bothers me? Aaron didn't answer. I've spent months feeling guilty. His face changed. Lori, not because I saved you. I don't regret that. She paused. But because I kept thinking I made some terrible choice that ruined everything. Aaron sat back down. Lori's eyes moved to the scar on her arm. I thought if I hadn't gone in there, maybe I'd still be myself. His face tightened. I never blamed you. You didn't have to. The words landed quietly. Lori looked at him. You let me carry it. Aaron stared at the table. She continued. You knew there was a warning. You knew there was a repair you kept putting off, and instead of facing what that meant, you let the whole story become about me running back into that garage. That isn't fair. No? He looked up. I didn't know it would happen. I know. I wasn't trying to avoid responsibility. Lori held his eyes. That was the problem. Aaron believed himself. He had spent so long avoiding uncomfortable truths that he no longer recognized avoidance while he was doing it. He wasn't a man who made one cruel decision and enjoyed the consequences. He was a man who kept refusing to look directly at anything until someone else had to live with the result. Lori sat back, and suddenly she understood something that had taken her months to see. The fire had not made Aaron leave. Rachel had not made Aaron dishonest. Her injuries had not made him emotionally disappear. Those things only made his pattern impossible to ignore. Lori looked at the man across from her. I can't fix this with you. Aaron frowned. The marriage? The way you deal with life. He went silent. Lori looked down at the papers. For years she had thought love meant staying in difficult conversations until both people found a way through. But that only worked if both people were actually in the conversation. Aaron had been standing beside problems for years, waiting for them to become someone else's emergency, and Lori finally understood what she had been doing wrong. She kept trying to repair a marriage with a man who changed the story every time responsibility came near him. That realization frightened her, because it meant the next decision was not about whether Aaron loved Rachel. It was not even about whether he would stay. It was about whether Lori would keep waiting for honesty from someone who had spent years finding safer places to hide. Aaron did not leave that night. For several days he moved through the house as if the walls had become too thin. He still helped Lori when she needed him, still drove her to appointments, still brought home groceries. But the marriage itself seemed to have stopped. Neither of them knew how to pretend anymore. Then, one evening, Aaron came home late. Lori was at the dining table. The financial records were waiting. Aaron saw them and closed the front door behind him. Not tonight. Lori looked at him. Sit down. He didn't. Lori, I'm tired. So am I. That made him look at her. Really look at her. Moment neither spoke. Then Lori slid the statements toward him. Tell me what I don't know. Aaron stared at the papers. I already told you. No, you told me enough to make the questions harder. His mouth tightened. Lori continued. You were talking to Rachel before the fire. You opened a savings account. You moved money. You paid an apartment deposit. Aaron rubbed his hands together. I never moved into that apartment. That isn't what I asked. I changed my mind. When? He didn't answer. Lori waited. Finally he said, After the fire. She nodded slowly. So before the fire you were preparing to leave. I was thinking about it. You paid for somewhere to live. I was scared. You keep saying that like fear made the decisions for you. Aaron looked up. You don't know what it was like in my head. Lori leaned back. No, because you gave that part of yourself to Rachel. He looked away. That was the closest thing to an answer. Lori's voice softened. Did you ever plan to tell me? Aaron was quiet. She already knew. Still, she asked. When? I don't know. Lori stared at him, and suddenly the anger drained out of her, not because she forgave him, because she was tired of standing in front of a locked door, waiting for Aaron to decide whether he would open it. You don't know, she repeated. Aaron's eyes filled. I never wanted you hurt. I know. I never wanted the fire. I know. I never wanted you to go in there. Lori's face changed. Aaron saw it. She looked down at her hands. You keep saying what you didn't want. He stopped. Lori looked back at him. What did you want? Aaron opened his mouth. Nothing came. There it was. Not another explanation, the truth underneath all of them. Aaron wanted relief. He wanted the marriage to stop feeling difficult without having to be the man who ended it. He wanted Rachel's attention without calling it betrayal. He wanted financial freedom without admitting he was preparing for an exit. He wanted Lori's forgiveness without facing what he had hidden. And after the fire, he wanted to be seen as a good husband without living inside everything the promise required. Lori could see it now. Aaron had spent years confusing what felt easier with what was right. She stood slowly, bracing herself against the table. Aaron rose. Where are you going? To bed. Lori, we need to finish this. A strange smile touched her face. Do we? He frowned. I mean it. So did I. She moved toward the hallway. Aaron followed. I'm trying to talk to you. You're trying now because I finally know enough that silence doesn't protect you anymore. Aaron stared at her. You think I don't regret this? I think you regret consequences. His face went still. Lori wished she could take the words back. Not because they were false, because she knew they had reached him. But she was done softening the truth before it arrived. The next morning, Aaron told her he had spoken to Rachel. Lori looked up from her medication. About what? About us. She waited. Aaron's hands remained in his pockets. I think I need space. Lori said nothing. I don't know how to fix this. She looked at him. That's honest. Aaron flinched. He probably expected anger. Lori had none left for that sentence. She nodded toward the door. How much space? He hesitated. A little while. To figure out whether you want to leave. Lori. No. Say it correctly. Aaron's eyes filled. Yes. The words settled between them. Lori looked away. Months earlier she had gone through a burning garage because she could not leave him behind. Now Aaron was standing in front of her, alive, healthy enough to walk away, asking for the freedom to do exactly that. He moved toward her. I never wanted this. Lori's eyes closed briefly. Neither did I. Aaron left 2 days later. At first he said it was temporary. Then lawyers became part of the conversation. Then the word divorce appeared. And Lori discovered there was a particular kind of loneliness that came from watching someone leave while you were still physically unable to follow the life you once imagined. The worst part was not Rachel, not even the divorce papers. It was realizing how much of herself Lori had spent waiting for Aaron to become the man he had promised to be beside that hospital bed. One night, she sat alone after a difficult rehabilitation session. Her body ached. Her future frightened her. Aaron was gone. The house was quiet. And for the first time, Lori asked herself a question she had spent months avoiding. What if waiting for Aaron to remember her value was the very thing keeping her from remembering it herself? The morning Lori received the first draft of the divorce papers, she nearly canceled therapy. She had barely slept. The envelope sat unopened on the kitchen table. Her attorney had already warned her it was coming. Nothing inside would be a surprise. That didn't make Lori want to touch it. Her body felt heavy before she had even left the house. At rehabilitation, her therapist helped her position herself between the parallel bars. Whenever you're ready. Lori gripped the bars. She had stood before. She had taken steps with assistance. But that morning, everything felt wrong. She pushed upward. Her legs trembled. Slow down, the therapist said. Lori tried to shift her weight. Pain shot through her body. She dropped back into the chair. Again, she said. Take a minute. Again. The second attempt was worse. By the third, Lori was crying. Not loudly. Just the kind of crying that came when the body gave up holding everything in. I can't do this. Her therapist crouched beside her. You don't have to do it all today. Lori shook her head. You don't understand. Then help me. Lori looked away. How could she explain it without sounding ridiculous? Aaron had left. The divorce was happening. The marriage she had nearly died protecting was gone. And now she was standing in a rehabilitation gym, unable to trust her own legs. Her therapist waited. Finally, Lori said, I saved him. The woman beside her said nothing. Lori wiped her face. And I still lost him. That sentence hung in the room. No one rushed to correct it. Lori stared at the floor. She had spent months measuring recovery against the life she wanted back. Could she stand long enough to cook dinner for Aaron? Could she walk into the bedroom they once shared? Could she become the woman she had been before the fire? Every improvement had secretly carried the same hope. Maybe then things would go back. Maybe then he would remember. Maybe then she would be enough. Her therapist stood and held out a hand. Do you want to try again? Lori almost said no. Instead, she placed both hands on the bars. This time, she did not think about Aaron, not the woman he chose, not the divorce papers waiting at home, not the marriage she could not repair. She pushed herself upward. Her knees shook. She stood. 1 foot. Lori looked down. Then she moved. Her right foot came forward. Barely. Her body swayed. She caught herself. The therapist moved closer but did not touch her. Lori took another step, then stopped. Her breathing became ragged. She was afraid, not of falling, of believing this meant something. She had been disappointed too many times. Her therapist waited. Lori looked toward the end of the bars. It wasn't far, but for a moment it looked like the entire future. She took one more step, then another. By the time she reached the end, she was crying again. But this time, she wasn't asking anyone to give something back. She stood there, gripping the rail, while the therapist smiled. Lori laughed through her tears. I did that? You did. She looked at her legs. They still hurt. They still weren't reliable. Tomorrow might be worse. None of that changed. But Aaron hadn't been there. No message had arrived. No apology had changed her mind. No miracle had repaired what was broken. She had simply moved. One step, then another, and something inside Lori moved with her. When she returned home, the divorce papers were still on the table. She sat in her chair for several minutes before opening them. Her hands were steadier than they had been that morning. The words inside were cold and formal. Marriage, assets, separation, a life reduced to paragraphs. Lori read them once. Then she placed the papers beside the file of financial records. For months, those records had represented everything Aaron had hidden. She looked at them differently now. They were information, nothing more. Facts she could use. She called her attorney. Yes, Lori said when the call connected. I read everything. She listened. Then she said, I want to move forward. The words frightened her, but she said them anyway. Not because she had stopped hurting. Not because she had forgiven Aaron, and not because she suddenly knew what her life would become. She said them because, for the first time, moving forward no longer meant waiting for someone else to come with her. That afternoon, Lori practiced the walk again. One step, a pause, another step. This time, nobody in her mind was watching, and that was when she understood something she had missed for too long. Her recovery had never belonged to the marriage. It had never belonged to Aaron. It belonged to the woman taking the next step. Recovery did not suddenly become easier after that day. Lori still had mornings when her body refused to cooperate. She still fell sometimes, still woke up angry, still stared at ordinary things, a staircase, a grocery store aisle, a pair of shoes, and remembered how little thought they once required. But she stopped treating every difficult day as proof that she was losing. That was new. Some days one successful transfer was enough. Other days she walked farther. Slowly her life began filling with things that had nothing to do with Aaron. She returned calls she had ignored, had lunch with an old friend without spending the whole time discussing the divorce. She started cooking again, first from her chair, then standing at the counter for short periods. One afternoon, she burned grilled cheese because she got distracted arguing with her neighbor about whether a dog was smarter than most people. Lori laughed so hard she nearly cried. It had been months since she had laughed without feeling guilty afterward. The divorce moved forward. Aaron became paperwork, then signatures, then appointments. Lori discovered something difficult about forgiveness. For years she had forgiven quickly because she thought forgiveness was what kept love alive. Now she understood that forgiving someone and allowing them back into the same place in her life were two different decisions. She could eventually release what Aaron had done without pretending it had never changed her. She did not have to keep a door open just to prove she was a good person. That understanding took time. So did trusting anyone. Daniel entered her life without an announcement. He wasn't introduced at a dramatic moment. He was simply there. A friend of someone Lori had known years earlier. They met during a small community fundraiser where Lori had volunteered to help organize paperwork. Daniel arrived late carrying a box of supplies. "Sorry," he said. "I was told this started at 6. "It did." He looked at his watch. "Then I'm not late. I'm committed to a different interpretation of time." Lori stared at him. Then she laughed. Daniel smiled. That was it. No spark, no sudden connection, no feeling that the universe had finally sent her the reward she deserved. They spoke again a few weeks later. Then again. Daniel was easy to be around because he didn't try to make Lori's history disappear. He also didn't make it the center of every conversation. He asked questions, then listened to the answers. If Lori said she was having a difficult day, he didn't turn it into a speech about strength. Sometimes he simply said, "Okay, what do you need?" The first few times, that question made Lori uncomfortable. She was used to guessing what people could handle, used to minimizing what she needed before they had a chance to resent her for needing it. With Daniel, she often said, "Nothing." He would nod, "All right," and he meant it. No punishment, no silence, no sudden distance. That was almost harder to trust than instability had been. One evening, Lori had agreed to meet Daniel for dinner. She canceled 20 minutes before she was supposed to leave. Her pain had been bad all afternoon. She expected disappointment, maybe irritation. Instead, his reply came a few minutes later. "Do you want company, food, or quiet?" Lori stared at the message. Nothing else. No guilt, no complaint. She typed back, "Quiet." Daniel replied, "Got it. Tomorrow is still available." Lori put the phone down, then picked it up again. She read the message 3 times. The next day, she almost apologized for canceling. Daniel stopped her. "You weren't feeling well." "I know, but I hate being unreliable." He looked at her. "You canceled once." Lori gave a small laugh. "You make that sound normal." "It is normal." She didn't know what to say. Daniel changed the subject, and Lori sat there realizing how much of her life she had spent preparing for disappointment. It took longer before she let him become important. Daniel never demanded that place. That helped. They built something slowly. Ordinary dinners, phone calls, disagreements that did not turn into disappearances. There were moments Lori still waited for the old pattern. She would say the wrong thing and watch his face. He would be quiet, and she would wonder whether he was emotionally leaving. Sometimes she pushed. Sometimes she withdrew first. Once, Daniel finally said, "Lori, if something's wrong, tell me. But I'm not Aaron." She looked at him. He immediately regretted saying it. "I know," he added. "That came out wrong." "No." She looked down. "It came out true." Daniel reached across the table, then stopped before touching her hand. "Can I?" Lori nodded. His hand rested over hers. Nothing dramatic happened, and somehow that was the point. Lori had once believed love meant surviving intensity, holding on, enduring, making herself useful enough that nobody would want to leave. But a relationship could also be quieter than that. 2 people showing up, one difficult day at a time. Months passed. Lori walked farther. She handled more of her life independently. Some days she still used support. Some days she needed help. But help no longer felt like a debt. Neither did love. One afternoon, Lori stood by the living room window, watching Daniel pull into the driveway. For a moment, she remembered Aaron, not sharply, not with longing, just as a fact from another life. And what surprised her most was that she didn't compare the man walking toward her door with the man who had once walked away. She didn't compare the future to the marriage she lost. For the first time, Lori was simply curious about what might happen next, and that was how she knew something had changed. Aaron was no longer standing between her and the rest of her life. Aaron married Rachel less than a year after his divorce from Lori became final. From the outside, it looked like the life he had been reaching for. A new apartment became a new home. The secret relationship no longer had to be hidden. There were no more awkward explanations, no more careful phone calls outside, no more pretending. For a while, Aaron took that relief as proof. He had made the right choice. At least that was what he told himself. But relief had a way of changing once it became ordinary. Rachel had known Aaron as the man who felt trapped in a difficult marriage. He had known her as the person who understood him without all the history. Marriage gave them both more history, and history changed things. Rachel began asking questions Aaron recognized. Why had he avoided dealing with a bill? Why had he promised to handle something and then let it sit for weeks? Why did he shut down whenever a conversation became uncomfortable? Aaron heard criticism. Rachel insisted she was asking for answers. At first, Aaron blamed the stress of combining their lives. Then money became tight. Then small disagreements lasted longer. One evening, Rachel found a notice Aaron had left unopened on the kitchen counter. She held it up. "How long has this been here?" Aaron barely looked. "I'll deal with it." She went quiet. Something about her expression bothered him. "What? You know that's what you always say?" Aaron looked up. "What?" "I'll deal with it." He frowned. "Because I will." "When?" The question landed harder than it should have. Aaron leaned back. "Why are you talking to me like I'm some kind of child?" "I'm asking when you're going to handle it. I said I would." Rachel put the notice down. For a second, Aaron saw something familiar in the room, not because Rachel was Lori. She wasn't, but because the argument was. The same shape, the same retreat, the same feeling that the person across from him was demanding something he could not immediately give. Aaron walked away before the conversation finished. That night, he sat alone in the bedroom and opened his phone. His thumb moved toward Rachel's contact, then stopped. She was in the next room. There was nowhere else to take the conversation, and for the first time Aaron understood something uncomfortable. With Lori, he had always believed distance came from the marriage. With Rachel, he was beginning to wonder whether distance appeared whenever he was expected to stay present. The second marriage did not collapse overnight. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, it weakened through ordinary disappointments. A promise Aaron delayed. A conversation Rachel postponed. A resentment neither addressed correctly. Rachel was not innocent in all of it. She could be impatient. She sometimes wanted Aaron to become the confident, decisive man she believed he was when they first became involved. And Aaron could feel her disappointment when he failed to match that version. But he had helped create that version. When they were together in secret, he had mostly brought her his frustration, his longing, his plans. Not the full weight of his indecision, not the bills left unopened, not the repairs postponed, not the complicated man Lori had spent years trying to understand. Rachel had fallen in love with a version of Aaron that existed partly because he had only shown her what was easiest to show. The realization did not make him blame her. It made him ashamed. One night after an argument, Rachel stood by the kitchen sink with her back to him. "You know what your problem is?" Aaron laughed bitterly. "Apparently I have a list." She turned around. "You leave before you leave." The room went still. Aaron stared at her. Rachel crossed her arms. When something gets hard, you're already halfway out of the room. He wanted to argue. Instead, his eyes moved toward the hallway, the old instinct. Get away, take a walk, let time make the conversation disappear. Rachel saw him do it. "See?" Aaron stopped, and suddenly he remembered Lori sitting at their dining table, asking him to tell her what she didn't know. He remembered how trapped he had felt. Not because she had trapped him, because the truth had. For years Aaron had called that feeling unhappiness, then stress, then pressure, then fear. But sitting in his second kitchen, listening to his second wife, he finally saw the pattern with nowhere left to hide it. Whenever life demanded that he stay and face something uncomfortable, Aaron looked for another door. Rachel had once been that door. Leaving Lori had been another. Even his secret savings account had been a door. He had spent so much time trying to escape difficult versions of his life that he had never stopped to ask what he kept carrying from one life into the next. Rachel looked at him. "Aaron?" He blinked. "What?" She waited. He had no answer, because for the first time the question was no longer what Rachel was doing wrong, or what Lori had failed to understand, or whether either marriage had been unfair to him. The question was simpler, and much harder. If every life he entered eventually felt like a place he needed to escape from, what if the one thing he had never been willing to examine was himself? Aaron did not answer Rachel that night. He walked out of the kitchen instead. Not far, just to the front porch. The old instinct, distance first, truth later. He sat in the dark and stared at nothing. From inside he could hear Rachel moving around, cabinet doors, water running, a life continuing without waiting for him to explain himself. And suddenly Aaron thought about Lori, not with the old bitterness, not with the version of their marriage he had repeated for years. He remembered details he had once dismissed. Lori asking about the electrician, Lori asking about the bills, Lori asking why he had grown distant. Each time he had heard pressure. Now sitting alone he wondered whether she had simply been asking him to participate in his own life. That thought made him close his eyes. The next morning Rachel found him at the kitchen table. "I called a counselor," she said. Aaron looked up. "For us?" "For you." He almost smiled. Almost. Rachel sat across from him. "I can't keep being the person who notices everything you're avoiding." Aaron looked down. There was no anger in her voice. That made it harder. "I don't know how to change this," he said. Rachel was quiet. "Then stop starting with how to change it." He looked at her. "Start with whether you can admit it." The sentence stayed with him. Admit it. Aaron had spent years explaining himself. He was unhappy. He was stressed. He was confused. He was afraid. All of those things were true. But they had also become places to hide. For the first time he wondered what would remain if he stopped defending every choice he had made. The answer frightened him. A man who had been given chances to speak and chose silence. A man who had seen warnings and decided they could wait. A man who wanted freedom without the pain of admitting whom that freedom would hurt. And a man whose wife had walked into fire for him while he was already building an exit from their marriage. Aaron put both hands over his face. Rachel watched him. Neither spoke. Across town, Lori was learning something different. She was not finished recovering. Some days still felt unfair. Daniel could not change that. Love could not change that. She still had to do the work herself. But she no longer confused healing with getting back what she had lost. One afternoon, she and Daniel were walking slowly through a park when her leg began to ache. She stopped. Daniel stopped too. "You want to sit?" Lori looked at a nearby bench, then at the path ahead. "I want a minute." "Okay." He waited beside her. No pushing, no pretending he knew what she needed. After a moment, Lori smiled. "What?" Daniel asked. She shook her head. "Nothing. That's suspicious." She laughed. Then she took another step. Her future was still uncertain, but for once uncertainty didn't feel like abandonment. It simply felt like a future. That evening, Aaron received a message from his attorney. The last remaining issue from his divorce had been resolved. He read it twice. Then he opened an old contact on his phone. Lori. His thumb hovered over her name. For a long time he considered calling. There were things he wanted to say now, things he should have said years earlier. But wanting to say something and having the right to interrupt someone else's peace were not the same thing. Aaron put the phone down. For once, he did not run from the discomfort. He sat with it. And that was where the story left them. Not with revenge, not with a dramatic reunion, not with Aaron receiving the punishment people might have wanted for him, and not with Lori becoming magically healed because she finally found someone better. The fire had taken things from both of them, but only Lori had learned that losing a life she loved did not mean she had lost herself. Aaron's harder lesson came later. He had escaped a marriage, then entered another one, and still found himself facing the same walls. Because some doors were not locked from the outside. Some were built by the person who kept refusing to stay. And Lori? Lori kept walking, not quickly, not perfectly, but forward. And this time the life waiting ahead belonged to her. Aaron did not become honest overnight. That would have been too easy. But after that conversation with Rachel, he started therapy. The first session was uncomfortable enough that he almost didn't go back. The therapist asked simple questions. Aaron gave complicated answers. Eventually she stopped him. "You explain yourself very well." Aaron looked up. She continued, "I didn't ask you to explain yourself." For several seconds he had nothing to say. That became a pattern. Aaron would begin with a reason. Work, money, fear. The therapist would wait until he ran out of words. Then she would ask what he had actually done. Not why. What? He had hidden money. He had opened an apartment. He had encouraged a relationship with another woman while remaining married. He had ignored the electrical repair. He had allowed Lori to carry more responsibility for the fire than he had been willing to examine himself. Saying those things without immediately defending them was harder than Aaron expected, but he kept going. Not because he believed therapy would repair what he had destroyed. It couldn't. Lori was gone from his life in every meaningful sense, and Aaron eventually understood that an apology was not a key that reopened a door. His marriage to Rachel continued for a while. They tried counseling. Sometimes they did better. Sometimes they fell back into old patterns. Rachel had her own resentments now. She struggled with the fact that Aaron's growth had come after the relationship had become difficult. Aaron understood why. For the first time, he did not ask her to make that understanding easier for him. Eventually, they separated, quietly. No affair, no dramatic betrayal. Just two people recognizing that the relationship they had built on escape could not survive simply because the escape was over. When Rachel moved out, Aaron helped carry the last box to her car. She looked at him. "I did love you, you know." "I know. I just don't know if either of us knew what we were choosing." Aaron nodded. "I didn't." She gave a small, sad smile. "No, I don't think you did." Then she drove away. Aaron stood in the parking lot for a long time. He wanted to chase after her. Not because he knew they belonged together. Because leaving had always made him want someone back. He recognized the feeling now. The panic that came when consequences finally became permanent. This time, he let her go. Years earlier, Aaron had believed staying was passive. Something people did when they lacked the courage to change. Now he understood the opposite. Leaving had often been the easiest thing he did. Staying inside an uncomfortable conversation, answering a question before it became an accusation, opening a bill instead of moving it to another pile, fixing something when it was still small. Those were the things he had never learned. Not grand gestures, ordinary responsibility. One afternoon he drove past the old house. The garage had been repaired long ago. The outside looked almost unchanged. Aaron pulled over anyway. He remembered Lori standing in the driveway years earlier, asking whether the electrical work had been scheduled. He had barely looked at her. "I'll handle it." He closed his eyes. That sentence had once sounded responsible. Now it sounded like a warning. Across town, Lori was preparing for something she had never expected to enjoy again. A small dinner, nothing special. Daniel was coming over. She had made most of the food herself. The rest, she admitted, came from a grocery store because she had learned there was no prize for making life harder. Daniel arrived carrying dessert. Lori opened the door. "What's that?" "Pie. You said you were bringing ice cream. I changed my mind. You do that a lot." "I contain multitudes." Lori laughed. "Come in." She turned toward the kitchen. Daniel followed, then stopped. "Need help?" Lori glanced back. "No." He nodded. "Okay." A minute later, she called, "Actually, can you grab those plates?" Daniel smiled. "Absolutely." That was what love looked like to her now. Not being rescued. Not being needed so badly that leaving became impossible. Just being able to ask. And being answered. Later, after dinner, Lori sat on the back porch with Daniel beside her. The night was warm. For a while, neither of them spoke. Lori looked at the yard. "You know what I used to think?" Daniel turned toward her. "What?" "I thought surviving the fire was the biggest thing I ever did." Daniel waited. Lori smiled faintly. "It wasn't." He said nothing. She looked at him, learning not to stay trapped in what happened after it was harder. Daniel reached for her hand. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I can see that." Lori looked ahead. She had survived the fire. She had survived losing Aaron. She had survived the strange grief of learning that the person she nearly died saving had already been preparing to leave. But survival was no longer the best thing she could say about herself. She was living. And somewhere in another part of the city, Aaron was finally learning the difference. But Lori no longer needed to know how his story ended. Her own had finally become enough. And for the first time since the night of the fire, she did not feel like she was standing inside the aftermath. She felt like she was standing at the beginning of something. The final step was no longer learning how to survive what Aaron had done. It was deciding what she wanted to do with the life she had left. Lori did not know the next chapter of her life would arrive quietly. No announcement, no perfect morning, no moment when she woke up and realized she was completely healed. It happened in pieces. A therapy session she no longer dreaded. A difficult day she survived without calling herself weak. A disagreement with Daniel that ended with both of them still sitting at the same table. A laugh that came before she had time to wonder whether she deserved it. Life slowly became less about what had happened to her, not because the fire stopped mattering. It always would. But memory no longer had the final word. One afternoon, Lori visited the rehabilitation center where she had spent so many months learning her body again. She had agreed to speak with a small group of newer patients. Nothing formal. She almost canceled. Then she remembered how badly she had needed to see someone farther down the road when she first arrived. A woman sitting near the window asked her, "When did you know you'd be okay?" Lori smiled. The question sounded simple. It wasn't. "I didn't," she said. The woman looked disappointed. Lori continued, "I still don't know everything is going to be okay." A few people laughed softly. "That probably isn't what you wanted to hear." "No," the woman admitted. Lori nodded. "I used to think getting better meant reaching some point where nothing scared me anymore. But that wasn't it." She paused. "I just stopped waiting for life to guarantee me something before I started living it." The room became quiet. Lori had not planned those words. She realized they were true only after she said them. Later, Daniel picked her up. They drove home with the windows down. At a red light, Lori noticed an old song playing from another car. She laughed. Daniel looked over. "What?" "Nothing." "That means it's definitely something." "I was just remembering something stupid." "Want to tell me?" "No." Daniel smiled. "Fair." Lori looked out the window. Years ago, she would have felt the need to explain, to make sure silence did not become a problem. Now it was simply silence, and she was allowed to have some. That evening, Lori received an email. Her attorney. For a second, her stomach tightened. Even now, even after everything was finished, she opened it. The last legal matter connected to the old house had been resolved. The message was brief. Lori read it once, then deleted it. She sat back, that was all. No dramatic reaction, no tears, no need to call anyone. She looked around the room. Daniel was in the kitchen looking for something he had apparently misplaced 5 minutes earlier. "I know it was here," he said. Lori smiled. "You say that every time." "Because things move." "Things don't move. You've clearly never lived with socks." She laughed. And suddenly that was the ending. Not a courtroom, not Aaron begging for another chance, not Rachel receiving some punishment, just Lori laughing in her own home because a man she loved could not find what he had misplaced. She had once believed the greatest proof of love was what she was willing to sacrifice. She had been wrong. Love was not supposed to require her to disappear inside someone else's problems. It was not supposed to make silence feel safer than truth. And forgiveness was not supposed to mean giving people unlimited chances to hurt her. Lori did forgive Aaron eventually. Not all at once. Not in the way people often imagine forgiveness. She simply stopped carrying him. What happened between them became part of her life without remaining in control of it. Aaron had his own work to do, his own life to examine. Lori no longer followed that road with him. She had spent too many years trying to understand why someone else stayed, left, lied, avoided, or changed. Her attention had finally come home. And that was the real ending of the story. The fire took Lori's old life. Aaron's betrayal destroyed the future she thought she was recovering for. For a while, she believed that meant she had lost everything. But she hadn't. She had lost a version of life that depended on someone else choosing her. What she found afterward was harder to build, but it belonged to her. Lori stood. Her movements were still slower than they had once been. Daniel appeared from the kitchen holding a missing fork. "Found it." She stared at him. "That is a fork." "Exactly. You were looking for a fork?" "I didn't say I was proud of this." Lori laughed again. Daniel smiled. And she walked toward the kitchen. Not perfectly, not without pain, but without waiting, without looking back to see who might follow. Because after everything she had lost, Lori finally understood the one thing nobody could give her and nobody could take away. The life ahead of her was not a reward for surviving. It was hers because she was still here, and now at last she intended to live it. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments. What do you think was Lori's greatest act of courage? The moment she ran into the fire to save Aaron, or the moment she finally stopped waiting for him to? Choose her. And if you believe it is never too late to rebuild your life, subscribe for more powerful stories that stay with you long after they end.
Thank you for watching Mr. Graham Stories, my beautiful, amazing family.